Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with Interfex 2018, presents Interfex Live.
Good afternoon. So welcome back, and we're gonna start this afternoon session. Hopefully, wake you up after lunch, and we're gonna start. If a lot of folks, I see a lot of familiar faces that were here this morning. We wrapped up this morning on AR, VR, and with Pete from Emerson. And we're talking about automation, and as promised, we got even more experts to talk about it this afternoon. So we got Jeff McDonald from CRB, and we got Angelo. I'm not even going to attempt the last name, being Italian myself, and Matt Edwards. Okay, and what we're going to talk about is again the utilization of AR and VR in our industry. Okay, so what we found this morning was, let's level it out so everybody's there. So Jeff, why don't we go through what is virtual reality?
So virtual reality is a simulated 3D environment that allows users to actually experience what the space feels like. So again, for metaphoric understanding, it's much like you would think of a video game. It could be a completely unreal environment or a space that is completely fabricated. There is no reference directly to the real space that you would be in, other than, we could model a space just like this building and then put you in it. But as you're looking through the headset, you're not looking at anything that's necessarily in the real world. It's completely a virtual environment, hence the term. The mobility varies. It can be from degrees of movement, basically with simple headsets that you can just turn your head around and look 360 degrees, all to some of the more elaborate systems that have handsets, and the handsets allow you to actually navigate around inside the space, in some cases collaborate, but for the most part, that's what VR is. It allows you to be in a virtual space. And
well, you know what, why don't we talk about augmented reality and virtual reality? Let's try it. We're one versus the other, or when we try to put some parameters and define that. You want to take a shot at that?
Yeah.
Angelo, you want to
Yeah, I'll build on that because we specialize in the augmented side. So that was actually a great description of what virtual reality is. It's precisely how someone who's working in this environment can expect to feel and engage with these devices as they're going through a process. And then augmented reality on our side of the world, what we do is we focus specifically on being able to see through these devices and have the environment that the individual is working in engage with the technology as they're going through a process. And so the contrast there is having the capability to be completely immersed in an actual simulation, which has a ton of different benefits that I'm sure Jeff is going to chat about later. But augmented reality is meant to see through these devices and interact with the environment you're actually physically sitting in at that point in time, or standing in or walking around in. And so it's a little bit of a contrast on being able to be physically in a virtual environment, or being able to see through and interact with what you already have in front of you, and augmenting that real world that you're working in on a day-to-day basis.
All right, so why don't we do this? And Jeff, why don't we talk about how is virtual impacting our industry at this point? How do you see that? And then we'll get back and we'll say, okay, Angelo, how's the augmented? Let's try that one.
So the virtual piece, we were just talking about this earlier today. So a lot of people in this industry, or in all industries, as a matter of fact, they're very used to doing what they do in their jobs. They may be process engineers, or they may be scientists, but as designers and people that are working to provide built environments for these spaces, we are very used to looking at 2D plans and understanding what that's going to feel like and be like, because we're in the industry, quite frankly. So the next step beyond that in our industry was to provide photorealistic renderings or images for people, and that was the next best way for them to kind of understand what the space was going to look like, but still no concept for them to actually have that feeling of being in the space. So VR actually gives you that sensation of being in the space. And for any of you that have tried it, there's a wow factor that you first have, that you've got this headset on and you're looking around, but if you spend a little bit of time in it, not too much, in a couple of minutes, you can actually start to settle down and kind of get over the hump of this unique thing you've got on your head and the way it feels, and actually start to feel the space that you're in. And certainly in the industry that we're in, there typically involves people, and it involves equipment, it involves labs, it involves all kinds of things. And the immersive experience that you get is probably the closest possible way for you to understand what that design is going to feel like and whether it really suits your needs, as opposed to looking at a 2D plan or looking at even a photorealistic rendering. So it really is the ultimate way of having an understanding of what that's physically going to feel like in the space once it's actually built.
And our clients really enjoy the fact that there's an operability and maintainability review to that process in VR, that kind of spatial feel that you just don't get from doing a Navisworks traditional 3D fly-through or just looking at a 2D set of plans. So there's things that we can look at, like with maintenance people, for instance, who normally maybe get a voice at a limited factor saying that, hey, we need to get the sample point, give us about 2 feet to get to it. And then when we immerse them into that space, they're able to really see, well, oh, you know what, maybe 2 feet isn't enough. So it allows us to really look and review at a space from a maintainability and an operability standpoint.
Great.
So Angelo, why don't we build on that? So, okay, so let's take that and say, okay, let's augment it.
Yep.
Right. So what's that?
Yeah, so there's two key areas where augmented reality is being used right now to really drive some value within the industry. The first of which is actually taking these, typical, very long paper-based procedures and bring them into this device and now create more of a human-centric workflow instead of a process-driven document. And I know it's kind of a little bit of a nuance there, but it's really important because then being able to have this workflow as somebody's going through their process and have the most up-to-date data, a text instruction, a photo, a video, or 3D content to describe a very complex process, having that information there as they're going through their workflow has been a real benefit within the industry. And then being able to use these same devices to also capture data while somebody's going through their process has also been a really big part of where we're focusing our energy on, because now instead of having to transcribe and write things down on paper and kind of going through that process, instead the device is intelligent enough to actually capture what it is you're working on, whether that's, say, speech to text for transcribing different speech or text values, or using computer vision and a little bit of AI to be able to actually understand what you're looking at and then extract the data element out of that process and have it be fully logged and transcribed for typical audit readiness. Having the same capability that you have with paper, but doing it now in a fully digital sense and doing it in a hands-free way is something that people are really exploring quite a bit. And then the other side of it is the collaboration aspect. So being able to use this device and share what you're looking at with somebody else around the world to then be able to troubleshoot, collaborate, or even just quite simply describe what's happening in your facility with a subject matter expert or a vendor or a colleague elsewhere, either in your facility or elsewhere on the planet. So those are the two areas that AR is being used at right now, and where we're seeing a lot of excitement for this technology.
So the transformation in our industry, in other words, if somebody goes out to the facility and they look at an instrument array and they got augmented reality.
Yep.
Augmented reality can, instead of them transcribing, can extract this information from the data?
That's exactly right. So a few good examples of that are, we're using computer vision right now to capture quite simply a mass balance digital number display. You weigh something on a mass balance in a lab, and we can read that mass balance and provide that value directly to the user, and we can know whether or not that value is right or wrong. If we predefined what those kind of parameters are, we can say, hey, that's bad, go down this different process and do something differently. And so there's all different ways now where this technology can not just display content, but go beyond and actually understand the environment that the individual is actually working in.
Okay, so I can see that as a transformation in our industry. So Angelo, in general, do you see a lot of this, people in pharma moving into this, or is it more across the whole healthcare industry? Where would you see the sectors are really picking this up?
Yeah, so we're seeing two environments that have really been attracted to this technology. The first of which is just the lab. There's a ton of manual labor that's still going into working through a process and transcribing what the raw material was, what the values were, what the observation is, and having to type that into an ELN or write it down on paper 3 times and then eventually get it into an ELN system. And so there's a lot of excitement specifically in that environment to capture data. And then in manufacturing, there's a lot of excitement for the process-driven stuff, being able to go through a workflow, have a procedure, and document that all seamlessly being hands-free has been an area that people are really excited about. But in the general healthcare spectrum, I think in the next couple of years, there's going to be a little bit more of a shift towards a lot more telepresence involved in both, at the patient care level, very, very downstream from where a lot of us are, but being able to provide that support and guidance from anywhere where a doctor or healthcare professional may be, all the way up to where we are in manufacturing and research, where the humans that are in these environments are using this technology to enable a lot of this additional workflows and capabilities that they may not have had with just paper.
I could see that as a real advantage, and especially in areas when we're doing a clinical study,
Yep.
large clinical study where we're trying to collect aberrant data, we're trying to collect reactions. I think everybody's been down the road, if you've been into phase 3 studies, the amount of that goes into these protocols, and if you missed it, you've missed it. However, in this particular case, I think we're going to improve healthcare where these late phase clinical studies, this type of technology is going to help it. So, Jeff and Matt, getting back to the other part of it, in other words, say we were going to build a new facility, so how would Augmented, how does that technology fit in, or what have you seen?
I can take this one.
please.
So right now, we're doing a lot of R&D with AR. It's not quite where it needs to be from a design standpoint, but it's close. Where I see this going in particular is a lot of companies are investing in putting their process equipment in programs that can be seen in AR. So you can put on, for instance, you can put on a HoloLens and locate a skid where you're trying to install it, walk around it, look at it, like I say, from a maintainability, operability standpoint, and just all kind of be on the same page. Okay, does this fit here? Is this going to be able to operate properly here? Do we have the spatial requirements? And I feel like from a design perspective, that's really where we're going initially.
One of the things that we always get hit, well, we don't get hit, but as an industry which is heavily regulated, in addition to everything that's put upon the folks that design and build the environment in which we work, there's also our ability to document and prepare for the inevitable cross-examination or an audit. So how does the augmented aspect on audit preparation, for example, how does that play in?
Sure. So kind of contrasting against what we all know, which is paper. Right now we have a piece of paper, we go through a document, we sign off on it, we time and date stamp it. Well, we can do that exact same thing with AR because we know who the individual is, they have to authenticate into the system, and once they take this device off their head, we can actually break that authentication chain. So at least we know that it's, in my case, Angelo is going through this process. We can have exactly what they did, at what time, any values they captured, and any single time we're using fanciful things like computer vision, we're also capturing the photo of that snapshot in time so that to revalidate that data later on, you can easily access that content. So that way now, for looking back at an audit, we know who did it, at what time, how long they were taking, what values they captured, if they were warned that that's a bad value, and if we're using any of the, a little more AI, ML type stuff, we still have a record of the exact photo of that moment in time. So that way we can still work within the constraints of the regulatory frameworks, but be able to still use a new technology.
So what I want to do is let's walk through, because we got both ends of it. We got the process, the facility, and the documentation. So let's think about that. I am in a situation where it's time to market. Faster time to market means, everybody talks about health. The dirty little secret is faster time to market means maximum profit. Sorry. But anyway, takes my breath away. Anyway, the bottom line is this. So let's think about augmented reality in the states. Okay, I'm designing a process, I'm going to need to put in. So we'll walk through from the conception and the process realization to the documentation and day-to-day running. So clean, white sheet of paper, Jeff. Okay, I'm gonna go faster time to market. I got a new biotech product. what would you do? In other words, somebody came to you, Jeff, walk me through it. Show me how you're going to do this, and we're going to turn it over. You following where I'm going?
I do, and I'm going to let Matt start first because he's probably a little bit more design specific. So you want to start with the design piece a little bit, and
it's clear what we
right.
want to do.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
He'll talk about the design piece, then I'll talk about some of the construction piece, and then we'll pass it over.
Right.
So we're talking about AR.
We're talking about going forward, right?
Yeah, it's going forward with AR.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, it is more focused around equipment reviews and spatial allocation in spaces where I see it being very beneficial is in renovations. So you can kind of put your equipment in there, you can do a walkthrough, you can have multiple people do it at once, kind of looking at it, reviewing it, and kind of just signing off on that and getting a space similar to VR where you can get that, but AR lets you in that space, right? As opposed to having a virtual space, you're actually there looking at it. So it's a much easier, lower barrier of entry for people to kind of dig into, because some people with VR can get motion sickness, things like that, and AR is a bit more conducive to people getting in at a lower barrier of entry.
Okay.
So on the construction piece, what we're seeing, and there are still some safety hurdles to probably get over as far as using an AR helmet out in the construction site. If we start moving that way, we're going to have spotters. We've already started talking about using some of these technologies. But the beauty of it is from a construction standpoint, without getting too much in the weeds, when you go to lay something out and you've got to put a wall track down that is the beginning of where a room's going to be formed, you're typically going to use tape measures, and you're going to use a snap line, and you're going to put a mark on the floor, and then you're going to shoot the base plate to the floor, and that starts to basically lay out the space. With AR, you can actually see the space, and you can turn the model on, and you can turn the model on in such a way that all you see are those base tracks, and they're on the floor in front of you. So you can just walk up and look, and there it is, and you just put down your metal track right on top of it, and you just shoot them in place, and they're where they're supposed to be. And so from a speed standpoint and getting to market, it's going to accelerate all of the trades, being able to basically, all the layout portions, which takes hours because, if you make a mistake with that, there's a lot of rework that would need to be done. So it takes a lot of that out of the process and accelerates all the trades' capabilities to get their jobs done faster. So your construction times are going to be reduced, which is going to take you closer to your startup, which is closer to your systems coming online, which is heading you towards taking your product to market.
And I really feel like from a construction point, it's going to start with construction management. Like that'll be the kind of the first domino to fall, so to speak, because you're going to have people walking around that are doing the inspections, and they're going to be able to click it on and off, right? So they're going to say, all right, let me click this on and let me make sure that my piping's in the right spot, and my ductwork's in the right spot, or God forbid that there's someone running in the wrong spot, and you've got to solve that issue. Now it's a matter of putting on a wearable, pressing a button, turning on the model, overlaying it with reality, and figuring out what the issue is.
Just so everybody sees from my own experience, and I try to interject that before we get to the actual. See, I always looked at it in three phases because I work with engineering groups all the time, and there's the structure I'm going to put the process in, right, which I call the box, and then we're going to put the mechanical parts inside the box, and then you and I are going to we're going to figure out the chemistry, and we're going to put that inside the box that's in the box. Trouble is, things got to move in the box. Case in point, facility that I had worked on, and I don't know, it was all about, and it was really fabulous. It was a all blend facility. Everything was going to be dry. Everything worked like a dream. They had everything sized properly. The only problem was they couldn't get some of the totes through some of the portals. They had all the, the point is, we laugh, but the point is, that's as big of a hurdle as if I had a technical crash on my form of development. So that's why I wanted to go through this way. So now we're going to look at the process. So we're going to draw all this stuff out from the guys in the lab. So we're going to talk that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, as a whole, this technology is going to be really enabling for exactly, you're right, for getting time to market faster. Because on your side, there's going to be huge shifts in terms of how people are thinking about facility construction, facility layouts, planning, as watching the humans go through the actual facility and how they interact with that equipment. And then when they get to where we are, and it's actually the humans actually going through their process now, there's a few areas where we're seeing time to market being impacted by the humans that are in those environments, whether it's simple mistakes, which happen a lot. There's not another time slot, and well, oh great, we just lost the batch because we're at full capacity. Shoot, the human did X, Y, or Z. It happens a lot, and we're seeing it across the board right now. And there are these big also mega trends that are forming with a lot more single use, which has been for the last 15 years, but it's still a big trend that's forming, and personalized medicine. There's so much more human labor getting back into this process, and the amount of the reduction in errors here is incredibly important, and making sure that when you start a batch and you have your end cycle, that you actually get there on time and that you don't have some human get in the way of this. That's where this technology comes in to decrease the amount of errors, decrease the amount of assembly and tear down time that's even taking to even get the line set up. And so there's a lot of stuff there and a lot of opportunity for organizations to use this enabling tech and say, hey, this isn't just something that looks cool. I mean, it does look cool, but it also can actually provide real value. Everywhere from design and construction all the way up to the guy on the ground or the girl on the ground going through their process.
This was particularly new, especially when we start to talk about personalized medicine. An area that I had some experience in was on a recent, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the CART projects that are ongoing out there. They're getting a lot of airplay, and they're very effective, and they're a godsend for health. Point is this, and it starts from ground zero because we were learning as we went. This is a new area, right? And it's sort of like a portable kind of process, the quintessential personalized medicine. So that would have been ideal. I mean, the bottom line is, you don't know where the holes are until you push the button. Okay. So it goes even beyond that. Now, but I want to loop back. I mean, Jeff and Matt. I mean, I kind of heard some hesitation on the augmented reality. So, what's the technical challenges there on your side?
It's hard.
Whichever.
I feel like it's hardware right now because it is so new, and there's a lot of software coming out, but the hardware is the technical challenge. Getting wearables that are wearable, because you've got to have time for you think about a big computer that runs some of this VR stuff, and you're taking some of that and you're shrinking it down really low into something like a hard hat that has a battery pack that you're wearing, things like that. So I think in the very near future that hurdle will be overcome. I think the software piece of it is there, but I think the hardware piece has a little ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say as recent as a year ago, we've been playing with a HoloLens for a couple of years now, which is a very common, one of the more common hardware devices that are out there. And the challenge that we've had for a long time is that we would have 3D models of the space, but there was no way to really, so again, augmented is where you have this overlay of information onto reality. Well, you need to be able to lock that overlay into its correct position to the real world for it to have relevance. Back to my point of actually using it as a layout tool. And so there were challenges with being able to lock that information, that virtual information, into the real world and have it stick. And just in the last probably 6 months, we've seen tools that have come online that are very common and easy to use. You basically have 2 markers on the floor, you snap to them, and your model snaps right to that real environment. So now we've kind of gotten over that hurdle. So the technology is moving forward, just as Matt mentioned, and in the world we live in, the hardware drives the software, drives the hardware, drives the software, and they just keep leapfrogging each other, and that's where those improvements come. And so I think Matt's exactly right. The next thing is that we rely on the hardware developers to start shrinking some of these things and batteries and such so that they can just be more comfortable. And then there's always the issue of safety as well on the job site.
So battery life is not always the #1 question?
No, so hardware is interesting because we purposely don't do that. We don't do overlays, we don't do 3D. The incremental value of that type of stuff, it's sexy. Don't get me wrong, looking at a piece of equipment and seeing a cool overlay, that's sexy, right? But the incremental value beyond just being able to present flat 2D content to a user and have it be hands-free and be able to interact with that and have it be conversational is really where the true jump, the leapfrog happens. And so the hardware that we use is not the big stuff with the cool 3D and the overlays. What we use is a lot more of the more simplistic, more smaller, more lightweight, and more easy to use devices that are meant for daily operational usage. So that we're not necessarily doing overlays in 3D yet. We will do it when the time is right. But for right now, what we're doing is we're focusing on the hardware that we know that can provide value today, And we've seen that across the board, deployed all over the world right now. And because the big jump is not to go to the cool stuff, but to be able to digitize your process and have a way where content can be seamlessly captured and transcribed, and data can be validated and alerted back to the user right away. And that's where we've been focusing our energy on, as we do wait for some of the additional hardware to catch up and start doing some of the sizzle that we've been looking for and waiting for all these years.
So the AR is actually optimizing manufacturing processes as we speak. Did
Yeah,
I get
right.
that right?
Absolutely. So we're deployed right now where over half of the top 25 pharma companies are using this today in operational use, deployed on 4 or 5 continents now in 15 countries. So we've really gotten to the point where we've been able to succeed with this emerging tech, but we do it in a way that doesn't have some of the sizzle that I think a lot of people are thinking about when they think of augmented reality.
I got you. Okay. So while we're on, I think one thing we should touch on, and I think is what's the return on investment? And I think we're going to be able to come at that in 2 different ways. Obviously, you use it to do what you do. You provide it so somebody can use it. In other words, you're an enabler. You're using it as a tool. So why don't we talk about return on investment? I think that gives us 2 really interesting viewpoints. So what would be your take on either Jeff, Matt, whoever wants to handle it? ROI.
So the ROI is, I think, and I think that we are coming at it from 2 different sides, right? We're out in the field, and I'm not sure if you're using tethered devices.
Nope, no tethered, nope.
So, but we're talking about using untethered devices, and we are looking to get a lot of the sex and the sizzle out of it, because we're trying to get that ROI for us is to really accelerate that workflow for our trades. So, the ROI right now is probably still, for us, where we're trying to push it, is probably still, frankly, it's probably still a little questionable on the AR side. We still think the VR side is mature enough that we are using that in a daily practice for what we do, for design review, and maintainable operability and maintainability. But the AR piece for us is, we don't see that it's quite there yet. So from an ROI standpoint, I think that you would be a little upside down, honestly, right now, because of some of the effort it takes to get you to that functioning point. But I think that that's probably going to be there within a year, quite frankly, that you would start to see that there's more value than cost. So that's where I think it is today with respect to where we're using it on our side.
Yeah, it's typically R&D right now, and to Jeff's point, I think we're about a year away where software will improve to the point where we can start kind of putting it in front of clients.
I would think, that's kind of where I'm at. But I think that, so if we come at it now, we're from where you're at, Angelo.
Yep. Yeah, we have 3 areas where we have really high ROI that we're getting out of this technology. Number 1 is global collaboration, so stopping flights. It's pretty simple, which is you're using these headsets to beam a live stream of exactly what you're looking at to somewhere else in the world, and a vendor, a colleague, a subject matter expert doesn't have to hop on a plane. That's a really clear ROI. The second area is transcription. So we've been able to actually cut transcription time by up to 60%. So that this way now the person just goes through their process, it captures that data automatically, and then stores it in a reporting suite for anything that they're going through. And then the third is deviation decreases. So actually stopping people from picking up the wrong paper binder, or not knowing what to do, or simply guessing. Being able to provide going beyond text is something that shows the big difference between process and technique. Because a lot of people we hear in the industry that different operators or engineers sometimes get confused. There's 100 different procedures that they've been trained on, they just forget. I mean, it's just, we're humans. And so instead, this technology can provide a way to show what it's like to demonstrate the technique as they're going through that process, instead of just saying with a text instruction says, shake flask. Does it mean like this or like this? No, it actually means turn it upside down. And it's something very simple, but it can provide a way where it can be very effective to decrease those number of human-based deviations that are happening in these facilities.
Okay, so then we're going to start. So how would somebody implement? In other words, how do you suggest for the audience? How do you suggest their company grab hold and implement? Yeah. What would be your recommendation?
Yeah. So we've been now at Interfex. This is our 4th year at Interfex. So we've had a nice long period of time where we've been able to take this augmented reality and figure out where to get started. And so there are 2 areas where we always recommend. It's either within manufacturing looking at processes and workflows, or in research trying to go through an experiment and capture this data. And what we do is we take existing procedures, existing documentation, content that you already have, and we've developed a way where we can ingest this into our system and then be able to display it in an AR kind of sense. So this way, it's a very quick way where I can take all of my existing data, my effective documents, they're already done, they've already been approved, bring them directly into the system, and then immediately there begin my workflow process. And so at least there, once the kind of pains have been identified, we start with these little pilots where it's a small group, it's like 3 to 5 devices, nothing crazy, but it's a way where we can prove the value of this technology very quickly and then be able to expand it out from there.
When you, just so I get it, I mean, we have a lot of data, so
Yeah.
if it's a new product, I mean, folks looking to put the genesis of that product in that environment. In other words, you know, we go through a lot trying to, you know, put everything, so there's institutional knowledge,
Yeah,
not just the guy to go to.
Precisely.
So how do you build that in, or are people building that in? It seems like a lot, you know.
So we always start with the content that already exists. So existing products, existing workflows, existing, you know, SOPs that have already been pre-written.
Okay.
But a lot of our customers now are completely rewriting their procedures and their processes to match this new way of thinking, this new way of going through their workflow. And so it's a slower process. You know, when you're rewriting content, you're creating it from scratch or you're reformatting it per se. But if you already have the existing stuff that you know, I get 10 deviations a year because of this single document. Something's wrong in here, I don't know exactly what it is. But if I can take that content, bring it in, and very quickly, you know, get it started, that's something where very fast they can get an ROI out of this. And then they can start the long tail process of incorporating this with a new drug product, a new manufacturing facility, a new whatever it is that they're working on.
How far back in the development cycle can they reach? I mean, not everything is in SOP format. It would seem to me if there's a development report or a process development report, there are key pieces of information that have to be rewritten in a format, am I hearing you right, in a format that can be dealt with in this case? Or?
Well, so it's interesting, if the text already exists, just the text, you know, a little more, like you were talking, more developmental, that text exists. It's in a Microsoft Word document, it's nothing fancy or something like that. It's when somebody chooses to go beyond and add photo, video, or 3D content, that's when there's a little bit more of this additional work that has to get massaged into the process. But we can very quickly take that text, bring it in, and have them ready to go right within the first 2 days of our training that we begin.
Okay, so if I was wearing this thing, I would open up, and would essentially I'd be able to open up the development report while I'm working.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about how that would be done on your end. How would how do you suggest a company, fledgling company in the engineering area, how do they get started?
Well, I think the first thing is they have to understand why they want to use the tool and what the value is. Again, I think we're coming at it from different ends.
That's
you know,
the intent.
on our side, right? So it's really about how we can help our clients envision what they want out of their facility and how they want it to work and how the space will be laid out and how their operations and processes work. So once a company decides that they're going to, understand the value of the AR or the VR that they're using, they would need to determine. First of all, you've got to get backing internally. Both Matt and I, work in the VDC world, and we're geeks in a way, right? We like a lot of these tools and they're fun, but we have to be doing these things for a reason. Everybody should be driven by what your end goal for, what are you going to be using this for? What value is it going to bring to you? So once you start at that point, you can kind of start backfeeding that and determine if VR or AR is the thing that you're looking for. If it is in fact AR, you're going to need to kind of decide on a platform that you're going to use, and you're going to need to map out, what you think that's going to look like from a cost standpoint, because it's probably almost always going to cost more than you probably think it's going to or want it to, certainly. So you have to map that out, and I believe you have to plan all that out, and you have to be realistic about your goals and setting, how you're going to roll it out inside your organization. And again, keeping it simple and understanding that this is your goal for doing it, and also knowing that it's going to change. That's something that we try to take into account with technology, is that you can have a planned goal, but it is what we call progressive deliberation, which is a fancy way of saying, we're going to have to change as the technology changes. So you have to be ready for that. So at that point, you're going to understand which technology you're going to go with, which one of the hardware sets and software sets, and have a full plan, because all of those things have to integrate together. So you have to have a full plan of where you're going, and that would be the starting point.
Do you want to add anything, man?
Sure. So I think from a VR standpoint, because that's a more common use right now than AR in the AEC industry from our end. What we're doing with our clients is kind of guiding them through it, and some of them have invested in their own VR, and a lot of it has to do with the software. So you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money making a really pretty model to walk through, but we've chosen to focus, again, more on the kind of maintainability and operability aspect of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Navisworks to do a traditional model fly-through. We're going to identify pinch points, and if it's early on in concept, as an example, if there's areas or rooms we feel are tight spaces, what we're going to say is we're going to come with a project team and say, okay, this is a project risk, we're going to note that, and I think this is a good application for VR. So you guys go ahead and get your operators, we'll have another meeting, we'll set up VR, we'll put them in that space. That way they can go feel around and get a very, very good sense of is this space going to work for me or not? So that's really the approach we take on it. We just don't bring a VR set out, throw it on them, and because then you just got a lot of oohs and ahs and really cool, but you lose kind of the value in it. So it really is identifying pinch points and then setting up. We use a program called Iris Prospect, and what that gives us it's a really neat program because it allows us to basically essentially drag and drop a Revit file into VR. So it's very quick, and we can do design iterative changes there. So we can do it at 30%, 60%, 90%. And as I'm running these coordination meetings where we're doing clash detection, coordination, looking at no-fly zones, looking at the path of egress, things like that, we're taking notes and seeing, okay, what's coming up with the client, where are their concerns at? And we're taking notes on that, we're going back, we're setting up the VR model, and we're bookmarking all of those areas, and then making sure that the correct staff is available for those meetings. And generally what we do is we take a VR setup, and we'll leave it on a client site for maybe 3 months. And that way when we're having meetings with them, and this comes up, we can really easily kind of load in the latest model, put the right people in there, get a consensus of is this going to work, or do we need to go back to the drawing board on this?
Okay. So I got one for you, Angelo. So we're talking about advances in technology, advances in manufacturing, continuous process, single, that's all been red hot. Mm-hmm. So the question really is it still the human technology interface? So where do you see this going? I mean...
Yeah, so we have a pretty strong opinion about where human labor is going to be. We feel that the kind of deterministic labor, doing the same thing over and over again, that over the long term, and that could be over the next 5, 10 plus years, that deterministic labor eventually will get pretty much fully automated, we feel. However, there is going to be so much more probabilistic labor in a sense of, the human doesn't know exactly what the best answer is, and the machine, the software doesn't know what the best answer is, but having them work together at that same point in time, based on all the data that's available, they can come up with some type of solution or answer that is substantially better than the human or machine alone could come up with. And I think it fits in kind of perfectly with where the manufacturing industry, at least, I think is going with a lot of the personalized medicine and a lot of the single use, because as cycle times get shorter and time to market gets faster, there's going to be huge demands placed on human labor to be able to keep up with this. And I think that's where this intersection of AR and AI and kind of this highly automated, highly sophisticated manufacturing is going to start to kind of intersect. And that's where we feel that over a long term, that's going to be a lot of the bigger trends that are going to be forming. And I think there's going to be a need for this enabling technology to empower the worker as he or she is going through her process in this new world where it's really difficult, it's really fast, and it's challenging. And it really, that's what I think is going to happen.
Well, Jeff and I had spoken briefly before we started. Do you want to put your views out there on, we talked about this interface?
Well, we talked about it a little bit, and some of it's sci-fi theater stuff, right? We use this term.
Sci-fi is good.
We use this term singularity, and that's where the wearables are the beginning of that, right? We're starting to put things on our bodies that provide us information more directly. We've seen in our industry applications where people can walk into a mechanical room, for example, and they can look with the augmented reality and look at a row of pumps, and they'll see floating over those pumps, they'll see digital readouts that tell them what the RPM and the flow rates out of those pumps are, and that's all in AR. And I believe that it's going to become more intense than that, and that Google Glasses I think are going to come back in a big bad way at some point. They seem like they're on a hiatus, but I can't wait for them to come back. But I think when that happens, we're going to start seeing amazing interactions that help us just feed the information into us. And I do believe that that singularity is going to come. There's graphs you can find out there that talk about scary terms like transhumans and things like that that are where these devices are starting to actually be physically integrated into our bodies. I know that's the sci-fi part I speak of, but I think that's where a lot of this stuff is going to end up going at some point. I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel about when you don't have your phone on your person, and we already have that sensation a little bit, and I think that's only going to continue to grow. And by the way, I love to disconnect for every other few days and just lose my phone on purpose, because it's a very freeing sensation. So it's exciting where things are going, and a little scary at the same time.
Yeah, I get it, but I'm sorry. Yeah, too bad I got rid of my Google Glasses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also feel like don't discount tablets either, right? So you see there's a lot of
You're talking tablets as in...
iPads.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Things like that.
Not the pills,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Gotta be
yeah.
careful, yeah.
But I think there's some opportunity there too. As you know, there's a lot of AR like Snapchat. We can all put bunny ears on and things like that. But from a practical standpoint, think about if you have an iPad in the field, and instead of having a wearable, you're holding that up and it's showing you, projecting, okay, this is where the ductwork's supposed to be, this is where the piping's supposed to be, and then you don't worry as much about those safety factors, because it's literally a hold up, look at it, okay, I'm done, right? So I feel like that there's some room to grow there too.
Yeah, I compound that because we're actually using tablets and smartphones quite a bit because there's a blend. Like you guys were talking about earlier, there's not one size fits all kind of device just yet, and having that capability there is going to enable this in the near term to get the little more sophisticated future. I hope the singularity though is not for another 25 years.
It's coming. Kind of running out of time here. We're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for stopping in. Thank my panelists. You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Perfect. Thank you.